Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Enhancing Employment and Financial Capability Program Outcomes, an introduction to American Job Centers. I'm Katie Metz with National Disability Institute, and I am the Manager of Financial Empowerment and Inclusion. I welcome you all today, and thank you for joining us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nakia Matthews, who is going to give us just a few housekeeping. Nakia?
Thank you, Katie, and good afternoon, everyone. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the audio broadcast panel, and if you accidentally close this panel, you can reopen it by going to the Communicate menu at the top of the screen and choosing Join Audio Broadcast. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer, or if you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial the toll or toll-free number you see here and enter the meeting code. Please note that you do not need to enter an attendee ID. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. To access the captions, you can click the Media Viewer panel button in the upper right-hand corner of the window open in the lower right corner. If you would like to make the Media Viewer panel larger, you can do so by minimizing some of the other panels. And conversely, if you do not need the captioning, you can go ahead and minimize the Media Viewer panel. We will have time for questions at the end of the webinar. Please use the chat box or the Q&A box to send any questions that you may have during the course of the webinar to Katie Metz or to me, Nakia Matthews, and we will direct those questions accordingly during the Q&A portion. If you are listening by phone and not logged into the webinar, you may also ask questions by emailing them to Katie directly at kmetz@ndi-inc.org. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and that the materials will be placed on the NDI website. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send me, Nakia Matthews, a message, or you may email me at nmatthews@ndi-inc.org. Back to you, Katie.
Great. Thank you so much, Nakia. Again, we want to thank you all for joining us. If you have not heard of National Disability Institute, and this might be the first time you're joining us, let me tell you a little about NDI. We are a national research and development organization. Our mission is to promote income preservation and asset development for persons with disabilities in order for them to build a better economic future for all Americans with disabilities. NDI's Real Economic Impact Network. Many of you may have known or heard of the REI Network. It started out as our REI Tour. It has grown by leaps and bounds over the years, and we're so enthusiastic that we now have an alliance of organizations and individuals of over 4,500 members located throughout the United States. They're all dedicated to advancing the economic empowerment of people with disabilities. This alliance includes nonprofits, community tax coalitions, asset development organizations, financial education initiatives, corporations, private sector businesses, federal, state, local government agencies, individuals and their families with disabilities. Again, all of us come together and join forces to embrace, promote, and pursue access to inclusion of people with disabilities in the economic Main Street. If you are not already part of the REI Network and you're joining us today, I truly encourage you to visit us at realeconomicimpact.org and join the REI Network, where you can receive newsletters and bulletins and lots of great information about how we can all pursue this vision and mission to increase economic empowerment for individuals with disabilities. I want to go over briefly our objectives for today's webinar. One, we want to define what the American Job Centers are. Many of you may know the American Job Centers, previously known, within the public workforce system. They were previously one-stop career centers, where they still may be called in some places, and in some areas they're called very different names. We're also going to identify how you can locate an American Job Center in your area, identify key programs offered by the American Job Centers. They were established to help job seekers look for work by providing a myriad of services and programs, which will be covered in depth by my colleagues in just a few minutes. They also include things like workshops, resume building, cover letter writing, access to job listings, job fair events, and much more. Many states also offer business services to help employers, helping them to hire, retain, and train workers, ensuring that they have a qualified workforce that meets their needs. At NDI, we want to ensure that they're also inclusive of persons with disabilities and help them in achieving that goal. We'll also talk about strategies on how to collaborate with American Job Centers, and keeping in mind that there are two customers of the AJCs, job seekers and employers. With that, I'd like to introduce my colleagues. Miranda Kennedy, who is the Director of Training and Senior Technical Advisor for the Disability Employment Initiative, contracted by the U.S. Department of Labor. Miranda brings extensive expertise in the areas of researching and analyzing policy issues, developing and executing training, and implementing promising practices in the areas of youth in transition, workforce development, cross-system service coordination, employment, entrepreneurship, asset development, assistive technology, community participation, and inclusion. Rebecca Salon is the Project Director for the National Center on Leadership for Employment and Advancement of People with Disabilities, our LEAD Center. Rebecca is a recognized national leader in policy and program development with an emphasis on cutting-edge demonstrations that promote employment and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with significant disabilities. Both of my colleagues today have a wealth of knowledge, and it's my pleasure to introduce them to you. With that, I'll turn it over to Miranda.
Great. Thank you, Katie, and thank you everyone else as well. It's really nice to be here with all of you today. We're really going to be giving just kind of a 20,000-foot view of what is the American Job Centers. And as Katie mentioned, many of you might be familiar with this. The job centers they comprise the public workforce system, as Katie mentioned, and they were previously known as one-stop career centers. They're still called that in some places. And, you might in your local area, they could be called Career Source, Workforce, the Job Center, the One Stop. It could be any number of names that they're known by, but we'll help you find them here in our presentation today and get connected to them if you're not already. And we'll also hopefully be telling you a little bit more about their services and programs than you might already be aware of. So really, the job centers, they were established to help job seekers look for work, providing those services and programs, workshops like resume and cover letter writing, access to job listings and job fair events, but also a lot more than that. They also, many of our states do also provide business services that help employers hire, retain, and train workers. And really the point is to meet local and regional economic demands. And again, it can't be emphasized enough. I know Katie mentioned this earlier, but it's important to say again, there are two customers of the job center, job seekers and employers. So the job centers are really there to serve both of those populations. And they're different populations, but they obviously have mutual needs and you want to bring them together. And the job centers are there to do just that. So let's get into it and talk a little bit more about how do you find an American Job Center in your area, especially since they go by so many different names. Well, if you're not familiar with the job centers in your area or how to find one, we're providing you with this link right here, and there's a screenshot of it as well. And what this is where you can go, you enter your zip code, and it will bring up job centers in your area, give you the names, addresses, shoot you over to their websites, and so forth. So I just want to say a few words about this AJC website that you can use to locate the local career centers in your area. The American Job Center Network site provides a single access point. It's open 24/7 to key federal programs and critical local resources to help people find a job, identify training programs, and gain skills in growing industries. This site connects Americans to online resources from across the federal government, nearly 3,000 brick-and-mortar American Job Centers. There's a lot of services online, but there's 3,000 nearly brick-and-mortar American Job Centers, and of course hundreds of local training programs and job resources that are funded through federal grants. So the partners of the American Job Center Network include Department of Education, Department of Labor, Department of Veteran Services, the GSA, General Services Administration, Small Business Administration, and the White House. This site, including the Job Center Locator, provides an easily identifiable source for the help and services that individuals and businesses need. including individuals with disabilities, as Katie mentioned earlier. So in terms of key services and programs that are offered by American Job Centers, services really do vary by location. I was counting it up. I've been to at least 50 job centers between Hawaii and Maine. And there's some commonalities and there's some differences wherever you might happen to be. So I've grouped this next section by categories for you because I think this will be easier to conceive and wrap your mind around. But the categories include services and programs that can be accessed by customers independently, by those job seekers. Also, services and programs that can be provided to interested customers of the Career Centers by staff. Services and programs that are provided to select customers based on eligibility. It might be that an individual is a member of a targeted population, veterans, or they might be receiving other kinds of assistance or support. It could be youth. It could be individuals who've been engaged in the criminal justice system. It could be seniors, older workers. There are lots of different populations, and there's eligibility for programs based on that as well. And of course, there are services and programs that are available to interested employers. So let's talk a little bit about this. So the services and programs that can be accessed by customers independently include, of course, individuals can access their state's job bank or CareerOneStop's national job finder, and we've got the link there. There's unemployment insurance information, which we know so many people think about the unemployment office. It's actually the job center office, but there is unemployment information there and support as well. So the job centers commonly have resource rooms with phones, free internet, and resume writing tools, printers, different support along those lines in those resource rooms, as well as job search assistants that are available for folks to access independently, and referrals to community resources and other agencies, as well as labor market information and employer information. So these are all things that customers can access independently by getting online with their local career center, job center, or by going into and accessing these services and supports in the career center in the resource room. Now, there are other services and programs that can be provided to interested customers by staff at the job center, and those include assistance with unemployment insurance, employment plan development. There's career counseling that's available for folks. There's a lot in terms of career counseling, and it might look different in different areas, but there is a great deal around that, as well as practice interviewing and skills testing, all of those things that job seekers are going to need to have in their toolkit as they're going out there engaging in their job search. There's employment workshops that cover a variety of different supports and strategies for folks who are going to be moving into employment, as well as accessibility and special accommodations for people with disabilities. So people with disabilities can get supported if someone needs a sign language interpreter, if someone needs additional time or any kind of other accommodation that can be made available that's reasonable. They can work with their staff to provide such. Additionally, staff can assist in making referrals to community resources and other agencies beyond what's available at the job center. So services and programs that are provided to select customers based on eligibility, this includes job training services and supportive services. So job training services, there's an eligible trainer provider list that every local area will have that have training programs that customers can come in, and if they're deemed eligible, they can access those training programs. And that's really key in terms of being able to meet the needs of the local economy. The training services are really defined as one or more courses or classes or structured regimen that leads to a recognized post-secondary credential, secondary school diploma or its equivalent, an employment or measurable skill gains towards such a credential or employment. So that's what those job training services are in a nutshell. And they can lead along a pathway. We're moving much more into career pathways with new legislation, and I think Rebecca's probably going to be speaking to that in a little bit. So I'll leave that to her. But there's also, in addition to that, for customers who are eligible, there are supportive services. as people are pursuing employment, there are a number of things that might be necessary to make sure that they can achieve that employment. And that can include SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, financial assistance, Medicaid, child care, emergency funds, things like if someone's, you know, struggling but they have a car and can get to and from, you know, interviews or get to employment opportunities or training, but their tires go out, right? That might be able to support someone in purchasing those. It could be any number of things that help someone to make sure that those gaps, someone doesn't fall through the gaps and as such can't pursue the training and get into the employment that's being set up here. Other examples would be things like transportation assistance, gas vouchers, bus passes, housing assistance, even things like assistance with uniforms or tools that are required for employment. Those might be covered under supportive services. So that gives you a sense of that. As well, services and programs that are available to interested employers include job postings. There are a lot of hiring events and business service information that's available. Hiring events are really for larger scale hirings that are taking place. But there's also access to the CareerOneStop's worker reemployment website for laid off workers. That's very beneficial for employers in our business community. Additionally, trade adjustment assistance is available to interested employers, and that's a federal program that provides a path to employment growth and opportunity to help U.S. workers who've lost their jobs as a result of foreign trade. So the trade adjustment assistance program provides these trade-affected workers with opportunities to obtain the skills, resources, the support they really need to become reemployed. And it really, those benefits are available to individuals and are administered through the states. So that's available as well. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over. That's kind of a really high-level view, and you would want to learn more by getting on the website, going into the Career Center, getting connected. I know Rebecca's going to talk about those strategies. But your own local area, those things, many of those will be in place, but each area is different and individual, and it's not centralized in that way. So there's going to be unique components in each of your local areas, and you'll want to explore that, and we encourage you to do so. So Rebecca, I'm going to hand it over to you to start talking about those strategies for collaborating with American Job Centers.
Thanks so much, Miranda. That was great. For those of you listening to the call, as you can hear from Miranda's presentation, there's an enormous amount of support that's available through American Job Centers, and we're working very closely with them through the LEAD Center. For those of you who are new to the LEAD Center, we are the National Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities. We're a collaborative of disability, workforce, and economic empowerment organizations led by National Disability Institute with funding from the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. And our mission aligns beautifully with the mission of the National Disability Institute, and that's to advance sustainable individual and systems level change that results in improved, competitive, integrated employment and economic self-sufficiency outcomes for people across the spectrum of disabilities. So with that as a, as a background, I really am going to be talking a lot about the importance of partnerships and the importance of leveraging each other's resources. I'm going to give a brief overview of some of LEAD's projects and the strategies we use to create partnerships that promote employment outcomes. As part of that, I'm going to discuss very briefly, one of the very effective practices called discovery and customized employment, which is being promoted by the U.S. Department of Labor as a universal design. It was something that was developed for people with disabilities, but chances are if you've been in your job for any amount of time, you have a customized job. I mean, most of us in our workplaces over time, people identify those things that you are uniquely talented for and are very good at, and over time you get to do more and more of that, and other people pick up things that other folks can do. It has a science to it in terms of assisting people who face significant barriers to employment, so we'll talk about that briefly, and then talk a little about the link between career pathways and discovery that can lead to employment. In addition to talking about what partners can offer, you know, and in line with the theme of this webinar, I mean, the key to financial independence is work, and the key to building a better economic future is work. In many programs, people see work as the end point, but for all of us, employment is a means to an end. It's a means to be able to have the income that we need to support our families, to live in a place that's safe and of our choosing, so that there's a strong link between employment and economic advancement, and that's, you know, really at the heart of the work of National Disability Institute as well as the LEAD Center. So briefly, some of the projects that we're doing that are being done in partnership with American Job Centers, two of them focus on discovery, and one is a guided group discovery where people who work in the American Job Centers work closely with vocational rehabilitation and some often other partners, could be the people linked to the developmental disabilities system. Centers for Independent Living have been very active, behavioral health agencies. So there are a wide variety of partners, TANF agencies. And what happens is a small group of people who have experienced barriers to employment work together to better identify what might be, how they might move forward. And I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. So guided group discovery is facilitated by people who either work for the American Job Center or for vocational rehabilitation or the DD system or some combination there. We're also piloting self-guided discovery in 4 states, which again is done in partnership with AJCs, vocational rehabilitation, community rehabilitation providers, and their self-guided discovery is for people who have some support network where they can do a lot of the work themselves to figure out. It's an alternative type of vocational assessment that gives you very good information to do a better job match for people where people are having trouble envisioning where they might work. For the last couple of years, we have run a community of practice between a small group of Centers for Independent Living and their local American Job Centers, where they are supporting each other's work with the aim of both identifying the economic empowerment agencies in their area to figure out how to connect the people that they work with to them, as well as working on supporting people to achieve employment outcomes. So that's been interesting. We're doing it in different parts of the country, and people have approached it in different ways. With the passage of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act last year, it's created a whole new conversation between the Centers for Independent Living and the American Job Centers because they need each other that much more. There are many more requirements for AJCs to be programmatically accessible to people with disabilities in addition to being physically accessible, so they are benefiting from the expertise that community providers like Centers for Independent Living can bring to them. Another project we're doing is with the city of Louisville, and they've created a workforce development and financial integration work group that has been meeting for the past 2 years, and it's a mixture of people from City of Louisville government and financial agencies in the area, workforce agencies, community partners, and they've created outreach and technical assistance materials on the integration of economic advancement strategies and resources into the workforce development discussions and into disability services throughout the greater Louisville area. So it's a very exciting opportunity, because people usually get one or the other. And as Miranda mentioned, you know, that not having financial literacy really can be a huge barrier and could stand in the way of getting and keeping a job. If you really don't know how to manage the income that you have, you could then not have enough money if something happens, and not having sufficient child care, not having good credits, not having transportation, all of those things can cause people to lose a job if they don't have a nest egg for emergencies, or if they aren't able to manage their funding. So they're working also on asset development. Lead Center also has published a brief on integrating financial capability and asset building strategies into the public workforce development system, and a few slides hence will give you links to that kind of information. So those are some of the projects that we're working on. I just wanted to say something about AJCs and the labor market. One of the that you can go to learn where the high growth, high demand jobs are is your local American Job Center, and you can probably access that information online, or as Miranda said, there are lots of physical locations in every community that you can do that. So they collect that information, they feed that information to places like community colleges, who then create programs to support workforce development in the high growth, high demand industries. When it comes to people who have significant barriers to employment, which includes people with disabilities, labor market statistics don't necessarily give you the whole story, and you can really miss a lot of what might be available to people. So it's important to know where the jobs are. It's also important to get to know the individuals, and I think that the statistic is that 80% of jobs that people get are jobs that are never posted, so are never advertised anywhere. And I suspect if we were able to poll you on the phone, most of you have gotten at least one job through somebody that you know. So the importance of using things in addition to labor market information is critical. Abundance of employment occurs in less obvious places and businesses. We'll talk in a second about customized employment, but customized employment doesn't necessarily focus on labor market information, but looks at creating other opportunities. And each American Job Center, through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, is working on creating career pathways in those high-demand, high-growth industries. And what they're doing as part of that is building cross-agency partnerships, clarifying who's going to do what training. Miranda mentioned that through American Job Centers, you can access training programs in different areas, apprenticeships, all kinds of things. So through the career pathways, they identify industry sectors or industries. They engage employers. Employers list job openings with them. They design education and training programs in those industries. So there's a lot of work happening in every area. And you know, we encourage you to research what's happening in career pathways wherever you are in the country. There are career pathways for youth. There are career pathways for adults. Where it works well, those get merged. Not in every place those are not merged. But it's interesting to know, to learn that information, to know where the opportunities might be and where you could leverage other people's projects. I mentioned discovery earlier, and discovery is a unique form of community-based assessment. It's an alternative assessment to a lot of the vocational assessments that people may experience. And American Job Centers have become very interested in finding alternative assessments for both youth and adults, because they have identified that they don't always get enough information to be able to find a good job match. So the discovery process identifies skills, abilities, competencies, and interests that often aren't revealed through more traditional assessments. People may have, something that they never tire of doing, that they do when no one asks them, and that really could suggest a job. There could be an employer that needs that it might be something that wouldn't necessarily show up in a traditional assessment. The information guides the identification of vocational themes, so not just jobs, but areas in which people might have an interest, and potential employers with whom to have informational interviews. And the customized employment approach has you, look at someone's profile of what their interests and skills and abilities might be, and think about what employers use that, what employers might need that, and then literally approach employers to say, I'm trying to learn what your business does, and find out what it is that would benefit them. And very often they will say, well, if only I had someone who could be, steaming wrinkles out of clothes to put them before they go on hangers to go out on the floor, then I could free up my salespeople. And that, could be a job that someone could do who might not be able to work on the sales floor. So it's finding that niche that could really benefit both the employer and the job seeker. And customized employment seeks to develop that win-win situation. So employers connect to potential employees based on meeting the identified needs of the employer, matched to the contributions that the job seeker has to offer. And it really could be, something that's very discrete and wouldn't show up in other ways. And, as I mentioned a moment ago, many people get jobs through people they know, using people's support networks to be able to leverage that information and find that information and to engage in discovery can go a long way. The good news is that many public agencies will pay for discovery assessments, so developmental disabilities agencies will pay for it. There are some behavioral health agencies that pay for it. Vocational rehabilitation pays for discovery in most jurisdictions. So it's something that can happen in partnership with the AJC so that for people who you might be more challenged with envisioning what the best employment match would be. It's a great approach. So we just wanted to suggest some next steps that can support either pursuing something like customized employment as an effective practice, or just learning more about what the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and the American Job Centers have to offer. I encourage you to visit the LEAD Center's website. We have archived webinars like these that have a transcript and a recording and the slides on group discovery and on customized employment. The U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy has a great customized employment page that links you to very robust resources. If your organization or family member, whoever is working on job placement, think differently about the way that you do job development. Just having people apply online, looking for off-the-shelf jobs isn't necessarily what is going to be a good match for someone, especially for a job that they may need to retain over time. So one of the good things that comes out of customized employment is that it tends to be such a good match that people stay in those positions and with those organizations, because it really identifies what the conditions of employment need to be and what is a win-win for the job seeker and the employer. We encourage you to visit your local American Job Center or connect online to learn more about their services and their Career Pathways Initiative, and to explore different ways to leverage the resources of the partners, community partners, financial empowerment partners, and people in the public system, so that nobody has to do all the work. The funding can be leveraged between different organizations. I also wanted to let you know of a 4-part webinar series that we've just completed on the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And again, these are archived. We've provided the links, and there are transcripts and slides and recordings. The first was WIOA from a disability perspective that just gives an overview of the many pieces of WIOA that impact in a positive way people with disabilities. The second is WIOA and the unified planning process. There's a requirement that a unified state plan or a combined state plan be created in every state that includes the workforce system and vocational rehabilitation, and where they're doing a combined state plan could include other partners like TANF and other agencies that support workforce development. And in all of these webinars, there are panels of partners who have figured out, who are working together and collaboratively to leverage what each other has to offer. The third focuses on youth and the changes in WIOA that impact services to youth. And there are many, many more resources under the new workforce law that support the employment of youth up to the age of 24 and youth with disabilities even older than that. And the last in the 4-part series is on Section 188, which are all the non-discrimination provisions of WIOA that highlights a guide that Lead Center put out through the U.S. Department of Labor and gives examples of how workforce systems have figured out how to meet the accessibility requirements, both programmatic and physical accessibility requirements, how to accommodate people with disabilities. But the non-discrimination provisions aren't specific to disabilities, so it's equal opportunity. It's any kind of discrimination. So it's race and language, and it's everything that someone might experience. So there's a pretty robust information there. We've provided information on how you can get onto our mailing list to learn about upcoming events and to access some of the resources that we've mentioned, and so that you have access to that. And with that, I think I will turn it back to Katie.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Miranda. As Nakia mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, or you can send them through the chat to Nakia Matthews or myself. We do have a couple of questions on queue. So with that, let's see. Miranda, here's one for you. How, if at all, are AJCs incorporating financial literacy into workshops at the centers on site?
You know, we're seeing that's actually something that's taking place across the country. It's certainly something with WIOA. The financial capability and health and well-being is much more of a focus now, whereas, you know, of course, that is part and parcel of we want to be able to have people economically stable and contributing members, tax-paying citizens, all of that. So really with the financial literacy curriculum, we have, like one example would be in our disability employment initiative, we've really been focusing on making sure that more job seekers with disabilities have information on that, including their work incentive information as part of their benefits planning piece. And the career centers that have engaged in the disability employment initiative are all required to become workforce employment networks. So they're employment networks under Social Security Administration's Get to Work incentives legislation, but they're not the only ones. There are also other job centers across the country who've chosen to become employment networks, and they have that piece with the benefits planning, and then also the other side of that being financial literacy and making sure that we're focusing on that as well, bringing in different trainings, and it could look differently wherever you happen to be. I would say that that's something to look into, whether that's being offered, if there's asset coalitions that are engaged. That's actually something I know you're going to be covering even more in depth in later trainings in this series itself, right, Katie? Talking a little bit more about how that's being involved and giving some examples of that and those practices of the financial literacy and how it's embedded. It's offered as part of those workshops in some cases, and we'll be seeing more and more of that, and that's a good thing. What other questions did we have? Does that cover that? I mean, I know that's kind of loose, but...
Well, you know, that kind of moves into another question that we did have. Let's say if they'd like you to speak more specifically to the strategies. Let's say I'm a Center for Independent Living or another disability organization. How could I work with and collaborate with the American Job Centers?
Oh, that's actually a great one. And I can take a stab at that, and then I'd love to also hear what Rebecca has to say. I'd say that you can definitely get involved with your local career center and check and see if, you know, talk to them. There are, in terms of the new policy, they're focusing on having more a committee that's focused on disability and employment issues. And I know many boards, many directors are looking at pulling together partners in the disability community to look into setting up a committee to focus on that. With WIOA, this is really our moment. It's our opportunity. People with disabilities are written all over that legislation. It's taken 16 years to get new legislation implemented, and based on work we did with the Disability Employment Initiative, with the Disability Program Navigator Initiative, with so many of ODEP's grants on customized employment and self-employment, and all of the work that's been taking place in, you know, since 99, 2000, with many different initiatives and grants. It's pretty incredible to see how disability is all over this new legislation, and it's a great opportunity for our partners to step up and say, hey, we see that we're supposed to be partnering here, and we want to be at the table helping to make sure that the centers aren't just physically accessible, but they're also programmatically accessible. That these career pathways that are a new big focus for us, where you're having stackable credentials, that making sure that those are accessible and how can we help with that, and learning more about that for your consumers and your, you know, the people that you're working on behalf of. So that's really, it's our time, and it's actually a very, very exciting time. I was just in New York City last week, and I had one of our round one DRCs in New York, who'd been a navigator before that, said that her board director came in and put down when the WIOA first came out last year, said, Kathy, did you write this? Because she's the disability resource coordinator there, and disability is all over it. So it's wonderful. I mean, the job centers, it's our time to make it ours, you know. So this is our opportunity to lose if we don't take it. So please, everyone who's on this call, connect with your career centers. And Rebecca, what else would you have to say about that you think I missed?
Yeah, no, I think that was a great answer. And our experience with the project between the Centers for Independent Living and the American Job Centers is that all it takes is reaching out to them. You know, the ones that are timid and assuming that they're going to get turned away don't get very far. The ones that pick up the phone and call the state workforce development board or the local workforce development board or stop in at an American Job Center and ask to speak to a manager and can talk to someone about the win-win that is available. You know, that if you ask them if they are comfortable using the assistive technology that likely is in their American Job Center, chances are they will say no, and that they would love to have support for that, or training on disability etiquette, or learning about where the assistive technology loan programs or assistive technology centers in your area might be. And in those cases where you're representing an organization where you can be providing some of the support and they could be providing some of the support. I mean, they have the ability to provide training programs that the person might not otherwise have access to, whereas you may have the ability to do a discovery assessment that can help inform some of that. You might go to vocational rehabilitation to get benefits counseling. You know, you can think through, and some of the AJCs are employment networks that also can provide support through the Ticket to Work program. So it's you know, you really need to have that informational interview, for lack of a better term, you know, to find out what they need, let them know what you need. And we haven't had a bad experience yet when people have had that, because as Miranda mentioned, they're not required, but they're encouraged to set up a disability advisory group as part of the support to the state or local workforce board. And many jurisdictions are choosing to do that because they realize that they will do better and they'll be more successful if they work in partnership with people with disabilities and the people who support them. So, so it really, you know, we encourage you to, you know, do that outreach and you know, find those people who, you know, really know that they're going to be held accountable for Section 188 and for making sure that equal opportunity is available to everyone that they're serving, but that they also, you know, that with your support and your partnership, that you'll both get to help someone together achieve an employment outcome and become more financially secure. I meant to mention that one of the things that's happening in Louisville is that they have been working with one of the American Job Centers to do a financial health assessment for everyone who comes into intake. And I know Miranda mentioned that some of the Disability Employment Initiative sites in different parts of the country are doing that as well. So there are those kind of ways to partner also. The more that you know, because that not having strong financial literacy, good financial health is another barrier to employment. So doing something that's a fairly simple assessment, is another approach that you could use. Now, thanks for the question.
Great. Thank you to both. I think one that's maybe a little bit quicker question that you kind of both touched on a little bit in the last, but if you're an individual with a disability, or if I'm sending an individual with a disability to a job center for a workshop or other opportunities, and they need they need an accommodation, how would I go about that?
That's a great question. Most folks, if there's an accommodation, it's going to need some advanced scheduling, like if you need an interpreter. Typically, we see that that's a request that you want to be able to get in 3 days ahead of time. When you're registering for the workshop, or if you're registered at the Career Center, there should hopefully be questions related to that. If there are not, I'd reach out to the contact person and let them know that an accommodation is going to be needed, and make here's what my preferred accommodation would be. It might be that there needs to be a dialogue around what that accommodation is, depending on what's taking place in the workshop or the training or the assessment, the eligibility determination, whatever it might be. But that's something to be worked on, and that's definitely where the WIOA Section 188, that checklist is going to be coming in really handy, because that's guidance on those strategies. If you have a disability resource coordinator there, if you have a navigator there, we do have a number of those folks out there. Currently, we've got 43 projects in 27 states with the DEI, but that's not blanket coverage in those states even. But WIOA Section 188 does address all job centers, whether you have a navigator or a resource coordinator or what have you. So that's the tactic that I'd take. Just reach out to whoever's providing that training. If it's a training outside of the Workforce Center, you could even just ask the front desk at the Workforce Center. Those folks should know this, and if they don't, they should be able to connect you with those who do. And additionally to that, if you're not finding that to be the case, that's another wonderful opportunity to say, hey, especially independent living centers out there, other community providers, to say, hey, we could help you out with this, because we noticed this was a gap and it needs to be addressed, and we're here to help you and be an ally with you in making sure that these centers are accessible, fully accessible, not just get in the door, not just have assistive technology, but people can access the workshops, they can access the programs, the trainings, the pathways to careers, right? That's what we want. That's a higher level. So that's how I would approach that, Katie.
Thanks, Miranda. We have just a few more minutes for a couple more quick questions. One wants to know, are the offices for workforce development, are they trained to do discovery vocational profiles?
Hi, it's Rebecca. So not necessarily, but some of them are now embracing it or doing it in partnership with the local vocational rehabilitation agency or the developmental disabilities agency or behavioral health. So it's not necessarily happening everywhere. I mean, we're piloting it in a number of places. It's not something that had been part of the workforce system, but they're seeing the benefit of it. And as I mentioned, there are ways for people themselves or people with their support network to do a self-guided discovery and bring that information with them. So yes, you can't necessarily count on that being available as an assessment, but it potentially is something that can be available through one of the partners with the workforce system. And in many cases, the partners, some of the partners at least, would be co-located in their physical sites so that you might have better access.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. And I think this is another important question probably so there's no confusion. One of our attendees would like to know, do AJCs require a disability certification or a letter from Voc Rehab that indicates the percentage of disability?
So AJCs exist for anyone who needs support in accessing the workforce. So you're not required to have a disability at all. Most people who use them, do have barriers to employment, but you can just self-disclose that you have a disability. You don't need to verify that. There may be some accommodations that you request where they might need additional information if it's something very specific, but to access services through an American Job Center, you don't need a percentage of disability the way that you might, through a veterans program or, some of the other programs that have that kind of threshold. And people can choose to disclose or not. It's really at this point in their best interest to disclose because it does open up the door to lots of accommodations and services through partners.
Right.
Thanks, Rebecca. Go ahead, Miranda. I think that's important so that everyone knows that the services are open for everyone. Miranda, go ahead.
Yes. And the focus really is on what are people's abilities? What are their skills? How do we bring those out? That's what the focus needs to be. So you can disclose and also talk about what might be beneficial for you in terms of an accommodation, but that isn't required. But like Rebecca said, it can be very helpful because there might be additional supports. You definitely want to let someone know, hey, if I'm on SSI or SSDI, that's important to disclose because if you're engaged in, you're pursuing employment, might it be best to assign your ticket to a workforce EN, to another employment network, Voc Rehab. Oftentimes anymore, Voc Rehab and the workforce centers are working in partnership, serving ticket holders together, and under WIOA, Voc Rehab and Department of Labor are going to be working even closer together. That's what's designed into that legislation, so that would be the goal there, communicating more, better serving mutual customers. So where Voc Rehab, you might be on a priority order of selection. You might, people with more significant disabilities might be focused on first, what have you. That is not the case with workforce. But it is helpful to determine if there is any assistance you need. There might not be. And if there isn't, that's fine. You can access those supports. But if there are, it's helpful to know. So we have heard where folks are thinking, gosh, I don't want to disclose just to dispel this myth, information is not shared with employers without your telling them that they can do so, okay? So if you're disclosing you have a disability, that's so that you can get the supports and the services and the workshops and the trainings, what have you. That information doesn't get transmitted to employers. Employers are not then alerted that this person has a disability, okay? So keep that in mind. If you do want to disclose to an employer, you can do that on your own. You can get support from workforce or other agencies who are working with you around doing that. That's fine. But we do want to let you know that there are all kinds of incentives to disclose, and there really aren't that many disincentives to disclosing. You shouldn't be ruled out of anything because you've disclosed a disability, and there will probably be additional services and supports available to you above and beyond reasonable accommodations. So anyway, I just wanted to really clarify that because it's something that is a bit of misinformation out there in the field. Wouldn't you say, Katie and Rebecca?
Yes, I'm glad you did that. So people have a clear understanding.
If I can just add, you know, many of you may know that a couple of years ago, Section 503 of the Rehab Act passed, which requires federal contractors to have 7% of their workforce be people with disabilities or to show good faith efforts to try and recruit. American Job Centers who are serious about this identify who the federal contractors are in their area, in their catchment area, so that by disclosing, you know, you become that much more marketable to someone who's trying to make a good faith effort to increase the number of people with disabilities within their workforce. So as Miranda and Katie said, there really are some incentives to disclosing it, and you can limit who that information gets passed along to. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. So right now, we only have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If we did not get to any of your questions, please go ahead and email us and let us know what those questions might be. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. I'm also going to take just a minute or two to see if Miranda, Rebecca, do you have any last remarks that you want to make before we close?
I just want to say thank you for everyone for joining us today, and please, if you're not already, go check out your Career Center, get connected. They really do need your help, would benefit from it, and now is the time. Now is really our moment to do so. So I encourage you to do that.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree, and also encourage you to check out the resources that are available through the REI network and some of the other projects at National Disability Institute, because I think there's a wealth of resources that are available.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Miranda. We truly appreciate your knowledge and expertise and sharing it all with us today. As they both said, we encourage you, if you haven't already done so, please join the movement and go to our sign-up. It's there, right there listed on the PowerPoint. Join our Real Economic Impact Network. You'll get a wonderful information, such as webinars like today, notice of when they're coming out. Our next one happens to be Wednesday, November 11th. 3 p.m. Eastern. For more information about this webinar, we'll send it out through the REI network list via email in the next coming weeks. You can also check out today's today's webinar that is archived as a recording, as well as the PowerPoint slides on our website, www.realeconomicimpact.org. Feel free at any time to reach out to us at any of our social media sites, as well as at info@ndi-inc.org. And with that, I'll thank you one last time for joining us today, as well as our presenters for being on the line, and we look forward to having you on our next webinar. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.